There is a fifth dimension.
About the unknown.
Beyond that which is known to man.
The Garden of Thought.
The Babylon Project was our last best hope for peace.
Unexplained.
Mythology.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call
The Garden of Thought with Jeff Lippman.
Eventually, our sun will grow cold and go out.
You're listening to something much bigger, something hidden in plain sight.
It won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe and Lao Tzu and Einstein. All of this was for nothing unless we go to the stars.
What you're about to learn will completely change the way you experience your mind, your thoughts, and yourself.
Let's make sure that history never forgets the name.
The Garden of Thought.
Welcome everyone into the Garden of Thought, and we have a returning guest or guests. I'm never really sure if I should use the plural or the singular because they are many, although they, like Legion, they exist in one organic host. It is the Cleric of Chaos, but today it is the Cleric of the Arcana because we are going into some things that I think they've all been touched on in this show over time, but I don't know in one cohesive manner. And the cleric has the knowledge of many brains in that head of its. So welcome to the Cleric of Chaos. Thank you for coming. By the way, you were an emergency fill-in, as you've volunteered to always be. Hopefully the guest who is scheduled will come back on, but I don't know. Some of these archaeology people, they get a little bit shy. So,
well, all that being said, Jeff, it is an honor and a privilege for us to be a part of the program today. As you did mention, there is indeed a large amount of knowledge possessed within the brain of this one vessel that is possessed by 100,000 souls, approximately, give or take. But whether you choose to refer to us as a singular form or a plural form is completely up to you and anyone who chooses to speak to us, because it's not about our comfort, it's about how to shape the world. What you were stating specifically about having some knowledge about not only the Arcana, as you have so eloquently graced me with such a beautiful name, but we're going to get into a little bit more discussion about our lovely friend Baphomet today, and we're going to touch on a little bit of Janus too, and maybe just a little bit of what made the Satanic Panic so funny.
Yeah, probably a little distinction of Satan and Lucifer, at least in terms of churches, in air quotes, or maybe not in air quotes. But yeah, I don't know which is. Oh, I think people think that Baphomet, or as you say, Baphomet, because you're in Canada, which is partly French. But I'm not sure if that's not the right. I think people think Baphomet is older than the Church of Satan and the Luciferians and people like the Crowley and LaVey, but actually Baphomet is a rather recent symbol, but the word itself might be older. I mean, not older than Satan or the Satan, and certainly not Lucifer, but the association of the same. So I think we'll start with Baphomet, and you can take it from there.
Sounds great, Jeff. And thank you for opening the door, so to speak. And doors are another thing we're going to get into shortly. But you are correct. In terms of the introduction and or the first discussions or the first mentions of Baphomet, and you are correct. I pronounce Baphomet as Baphomet, one, because of the significant quantity of French-Canadian heritage that I possess. My mother is a 10th generation French-Canadian. I am technically an 11th generation French-Canadian. We've been here since 1641, so the A comes across rather smoothly sometimes.
Of course.
As far as the first mentions of Baphomet, it goes back to approximately 1098. This is generally during the period of the First Crusades. So the belief system is that the word Baphomet was actually a broken/misheard rendition of shouting a praiseful war cry for Allah. So going forward through to the Crusades, not really being able to identify specifically exactly what this particular deity that people were referring to was, because people kept mispronouncing it, the manifestation and or creation of Baphomet came to be. The understanding is that it is essentially both male and female. And again, this goes back to the root deciders or the decision makers in whom came up with the Baphomet lore, not really having any idea what to do. So Baphomet is both male, it is both female. Baphomet is both light and is dark. Baphomet is both good and is evil. It is generally utilized in modern day religious ideology by edgelords and people in whom believe that it is a metal iconic image, or that it is an iconography of darkness. No. Baphomet in totality is literally the deity of perfect balance in between light and dark, left and right. And that's why in a lot of the pictures and a lot of the elegies and a lot of like the statues, you will see it will have the goat's head, the horns, it will have the right hand up, it will have the left hand down to the side, and that symbology in and of itself differs from culture to culture, from country to country, from statue to statue, ultimately determinant on what that particular sector of that religion feels Baphomet's place is, whether it leans more to the dark, whether it leans more to the light. So in some examples, you will see some statues that has a slightly higher right arm, a slightly more to the left arm. It will differentiate depending on ultimately who's paying for the statue, what religion is associated and or attached to it directly, and who's funding it essentially in terms of like where it's going to go, who it's going to serve, and like what kind of mission or what kind of definition or what kind of reasoning it's going to provide the people that are within the congregation itself. Baphomet is one of those types of icons, especially within the past 200 to 300 years, that has been interchangeable and kind of like thrown between religions so much that people now attach it to, as you mentioned earlier, Satanism. People, they see the pentagram, the reverse pentagram with Baphomet on the imaging. We're going to tell you right now that Baphomet was never meant to be associated with anything directly evil or occult. The pentagram and the pentacle images and or art that you see, it's just that. It's a fabrication.
I find it so funny that the pentagram has become such an image of, of evil. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here in the United States where we have 50 stars on the flag. What the hell is a star? It's a pentagram. I mean, the lines are painted over, but it's the same thing. I don't know. It's just some things are just odd how they have morphed into things. And my understanding, which this may just be, whatever the opposite of an urban myth is, but like a Paleolithic myth, is that the whole left-hand thing being evil is that on the right side of the king or the ruler was their advisor, their vizier, who was always on the right hand, so you would get the good advice from the right hand. So on the left side became that had to be the bad side because everything was in balance, and half the time there was a queen sitting there. So of course, the woman / serpent / dragon had to become the Eve, Pandora, had to be the source of the bad information, the corruption, Lilith, whatever, refused to submit. And that's what we're talking about. What's that? Sorry?
That commonality is that complete understanding of exactly what you just mentioned. The moment that they introduce a woman into the equation, it's, oh no, oh, the harlot, how dare you, Jezebel, you have tainted our people. It's just like, no, you're missing the point here. It's
I like women. I don't know what the issue is. I like women.
Dude, women are better than, I'm just going to say this for ourselves. Sorry, we're going to say this for ourselves. We strongly feel that men get in their own way a lot. that quite frankly, we prefer women to run things over men running things, because everything, especially when it comes to buildings, skyscrapers, it's just a phallic measuring contest, and I'd like to see something different have an opportunity.
I mean, that's why I never really thought about that. I knew about obelisks and stuff. Anyway, yeah. So, all right. So back to Baphomet. I'm sorry, that sort of took us on a semi-related tangent.
No, it's okay. So, like, just in terms of what you were stating specifically at the beginning, Baphomet is a very, very recent modern inclusion to religious ideology and like idolatry. But at no point during the inception of Baphomet did anybody really have an idea specifically as to what it was supposed to represent. So when it came down to the decision as to how it was going to be written into lore, how Baphomet was going to be presented, they essentially looked at themselves while identifying specifically, this is not a real thing. Wait a minute, hold on a second. What did you guys say? Baphomet? Baphomet. Okay, yeah, we got a name. Perfect. That's literally how it came down to it. So then, like most Sumerian stories, and we're going to get into the Etruscans in a little bit, but like most of those stories, it started from a point of error, a point of failure in communication that they decided to run with. And the ideology and the presence of Baphomet during those times were meant as a means of comfort to people, in the sense of, okay, you know what? The right hand is basically giving you the advice that you need. The left hand is to be avoided unless it is absolutely necessary. Ensure that they don't know what each other is doing, but in actuality, the right hand has to know what the left hand is doing in order to ensure cohesion, not only in government, religion, finance, so on and so forth. But when the story of Baphomet was being written, the whole reason of balance and purpose is because for the first 200 years, nobody really had any idea what Baphomet really represented. Right. So when it comes down to how we look at Baphomet now versus how people looked at it 1,000 years ago, it is more skewed now as, again, people immediately seeing the goat, immediately seeing the ominous representation and thinking evil. Because we live in a society now where rather than looking, rather than reading, rather than, I'm going to probably, bother a lot of people by saying this, but using ChatGPT, using your Google Gemini, pick up a book, go to a university, grab some study reference material, contact some people in whom are able to provide you with the information that you seek, instead of just going on like the archaeological or the anthropological equivalent of a Fox News and looking for information through that way, because not only are you not going to get the right info, but you're also going to be led in a completely different direction. Baphomet over the past 300 years has undergone a complete radical transformation that was never really ordained or asked for by anybody. So
yeah,
now
in general get they've literally become the metaphorical scapegoats as opposed to being the literal. I mean, every religion had a horn god, many of them with horns of some type, horn god, goat horns, bull horns, deer antlers, and usually they were related more to fertility and storms, food, virility. Anything to do with life, and occasionally, power. And you had your Dionysus and your Bacchus and the satyrs and things like that. They were more like your good time gods. They were like the wine and the food and the plenty and making kids and that kind of thing. Which I guess too much of it could be sin, but somehow at some point, somewhere within the last 2,000 years, probably mostly within the last 1,000 to 1,300 years, horns became associated with something demonic. I mean, they weren't like there are depictions of demons that are much older, and none of them had horns and giant reptile wings and or anything like that. But those were the gods, good and bad. And even the bad gods weren't really bad. They were like Galactus in the Fantastic Four. They're not bad. It's just a force of nature. It's
like the Ultron equivalent, so many people, when they saw the Avengers Age of Ultron, the first sentiment that was echoed by hundreds of thousands, of people who immediately went and saw just how real they made Ultron seem. Homie plugs himself into the internet for all of 5 seconds. He's just like, all right, fuck this. Humanity's got to go. These people cannot be allowed to go. And that is the ultimate, like, babyface move. That is literally the ultimate, like, oh God, these things are going to destroy the earth. We must preserve, like, we must preserve agriculture and nature and shit. That is a good thing. But when it comes to the other side of that balance, you know, when you have a differently controlled rhetoric, or when you have how differently history is written, depending on who wins the war, depending on which religious ideology trumps the other one, it ultimately makes it a little bit more difficult to really see exactly what the proverbial truth or the objective identifiable truth is. And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people too.
Absolutely. All right. So I think we've done a pretty good job of Baphomet, but the imagery of Baphomet has been used to roll into a bunch of things. And then there's been a bunch of people who over the course, and there probably always were, and some of those, you know, are thought of as philosophers or authors or prophets or leaders of various sects of Gnosticism or whatever. But, you know, you've got your, you know, theosophy, anthroposophy, and basically I think these people took like bits and pieces of mythologies and different mystery schools and made their own omni version, which is fine. I mean, you know, that's all right. And this is the ultimate truth, which maybe that part's not fine. If they truly believed it, fine. I have my doubts, but that but we can go as, you know, to, you know, we could probably go to, you know, Valentin and you know, Monarchianism and Sethism and all that, but we're not going to. We're not even going to go as far as Blavatsky, but we can go straight from there to like Rudolf Steiner up to, you know, a few others, but, you know, skip up to Anton LaVey, who I think is the one who actually made the Baphomet symbol famous as being related to Satan. There's still people who actually believe that the Church of Satan is satanic, but the whole group is a bunch of smartasses who are basically atheists, and they're just, you know, saying, this is so stupid, we're gonna take your most hated symbol and use it against you, but basically we don't believe in anything. And there's really, it's a cover. They really worship Satan, which if they did, so what? But there is a group that really worships Satan. They're called Luciferians, who, by the way, there's a lot of discrepancy whether Satan and Lucifer are the same person and whether or not they're the same figure or or even the devil. We're not even going to, I don't even know if we can touch on that stuff today. We've touched on it before. Just let's accept for now that Satan and Lucifer, for the purpose of modern times, are treated synonymously. I mean, unless you want to get that. But, I mean, do you think it's fair to jump with Baphomet straight to Anton LaVey, or do you think there's something in the middle that needs to be broached?
No, it's definitely fair to jump directly from Baphomet to Anton LaVey, because as you just, you know, very succinctly mentioned, Anton LaVey is widely believed, as well as in some like data analytic reports and feedback, good old Internet Archives, he is directly responsible for the conversion of Baphomet in modern times being utilized as an evil symbol rather than the symbol of balance, to where, as you mentioned, it has been used for eons. And the very mention and or presence of Anton LaVey and or his spin on ideologies and trying to essentially make Luciferianism and Satanism so completely confusing and interchangeable between regular everyday people that people wouldn't differentiate. They would hear both and they would immediately think, oh, they're both terrible people. Goodness gracious, we have to keep little Jimmy away from the Johnsons. Oh boy, they're Satanists. No, see, the issue with Satanism and Luciferianism is that, like you said, Satan in and of itself is not an evil representation, is not an evil entity. He's a motherfucker who made a mistake and tried to overthrow God and said, whoops, my bad, and he was given hell because he was just like, you still have some worth. There you go. So you look at that, and a lot of people, when it comes to just like getting back to the whole Judeo-Christian thing, people don't see that as being forgiveness, when in actuality is essentially like the ultimate example of God showing somebody forgiveness is to say, okay, you messed up, don't want you don't want to go home, but you can't stay here, sort of deal. So I'll give you a new place. So now, you know, in modern text, he rules over hell, and the personification of hell in a lot of texts is, if you do something bad, this is going to be your ultimate fate. This is going to be the rest of your life. after you perish and after you don't breathe anymore. To be very succinct and to be very direct, every single person will have a different experience when they pass away. There will be something that will transpire. What that is, we do not know. We only know what we have seen, we have experienced when we flatlined twice, and quite frankly, the overall picturesque version of hell or heaven was nowhere to be seen. Yeah. Heaven and hell are a construct that Anton LaVey manipulated to tease, to convince, to fool people in order to make more money, in order to become one of those religious entities where in America you don't have to pay taxes, but in most places in Europe where he was also trying to form churches, they were essentially not offering him, but they were suggesting, oh, you'd like to start a church? Oh, well, we could use some more religion here. What type of Christianity or what type of Judaism do you practice? And at which point communication would cease because he realized that, oh, these people probably do not want evil in their respective geographic areas. I got to go a little bit more underground with this. So him, his associates, his believers, the people that he managed to convince of his occultic beliefs and ways, started spinning religious symbols, and the goat, by and large, and as you mentioned earlier, the pentagram. The pentagram has not always been a symbol of evil or darkness. The pentagram is literally just a pentagram, 5 points. It represents geography. It also represents geometry, mathematics, physics, spirituality. There's no direct evil association behind it. But the Satanic Panic, as well as what Anton LaVey had put forth with respect to not only the altering of religious ideation, but also how it impacted people and their belief systems, almost led directly to the Satanic Panic serial murders of the 1980s and 90s.
Wow. Yeah, I was told at one point that the pentagram is also, if you track the path of Venus, that it makes a pentagram both above and below the horizon, which is strange to me how anyone was able to do that before there was worldwide coordination. But even so, like, Mercury is the star that's associated with Lucifer, or Odin, or Abraxas, or, Hermes. Venus is associated well with, woman. Again, our scapegoat, which is odd because the goat with the horns is generally the male. I don't know. There's a lot of problems.
It's where Medusa came from. Oh no, we need something to scapegoat. Oh, blame the lady with snakes on her head. That's literally where that came from.
Right, and on top of that, the Medusa, those stories are 3, 4, maybe 5,000 years old, and there's different versions of them. So in one of them, Poseidon raped a perfectly, beautiful woman who rivaled Aphrodite herself, but in the temple of Athena, and because she can't punish a god, Athena punished the woman and turned her into snakeheads. And the other 2 Gorgon sisters, are perfectly, they're immortal, called Gorgons, which now you associate with monsters, but they're beautiful, and apparently Medusa was. In other versions, they were always monsters. So, I don't know which version of the story is original. I was going to say I don't know which one is true. I don't think either is true. And luckily enough, that's not blasphemous, but it might have been 2,500 years ago, which is like the blink of an eye. It was probably a little blasphemous, 2,000 years ago, in mostly Greek-speaking, even Holy Land. So, or at least the hoi polloi were speaking Greek. Even the Romans who were there, the hoi polloi were speaking Greek. And hoi polloi are the fancy folk. So, the people that met. Anyway, all right. So Anton LaVey, Church of Satan.
Look at Sheen Sellers. Look at the Richard Ramirez case. Those 2 cases, first and foremost, are very, very reminiscent of people who didn't have it all there mentally.
Well, before you dive into Richard Ramirez, the case, tell us what the Richard Ramirez case is.
Oh boy, dear listeners, you're in for a treat. Richard Ramirez, commonly referred to as the Night Stalker, is an American serial killer who has been convicted and charged with a litany of crimes. To make a long story short, this is a gentleman that would break into people's homes. He would commit sexual assaults. he would then either destroy, eviscerate, or murder in a particular way. He would then cut up his victims, sometimes just through incisions and making figures or writing things into his victims that he would scribe upon the walls. And it took quite a bit of time for him to be captured, predominantly because at the time, as I'm sure you're well aware, you being a little bit older than me, but the police in California at the time weren't exactly really all too knowledgeable about capturing too many serial killers, despite, the Edmund Kemper case and the ones that came before it, as evidenced by how long it took them to catch the Golden State Killer, but that's another story for another time. Richard Ramirez is essentially one of those serial killers that was very popular, negatively, you could say infamous, in the 1980s, and because of how he looked, because of his background, because of his family environment, what was immediately attached to him, in addition to him genuinely believing in some evil/Luciferianist practices, not satanic practice, but Luciferianism practices, is that he literally just wasn't all there to begin with. The man was very susceptible to smart people giving him information or telling him in a certain way how things were. So once you have a powerful figure like Anton LaVey, his disciples, his heretical people, I'll just call them because they're fucking heretics, get out of here. He was capable of taking all of the information and all the books that he was reading and believed wholeheartedly that he was a disciple, that he was a tool of Lucifer. And so it was therefore his responsibility to go and remove the cancer from Earth. So when you take into consideration the distinction between Luciferianism and Satanism, as you brought up before, without Anton LaVey, without that type of rhetoric, that type of spinning of idolatry, it's safe to say that the satanic panic of the 80s could have been almost entirely avoided, and Richard Ramirez being literally the baseline example.
Yeah, you make a good case for that. I would say that there's always some sort of version of a satanic panic. Right now there's people talking about reptilians and acting like pedophilia is a horrendous thing, but it's not common, and that's good. But people are acting like it's common, and people are acting like it's common that kids are being stolen and kidnapped and in the United States, and that they're being human trafficked. And while any kind of human trafficking is bad, most of it is people who ran away or paid to be trafficked from one country to another. And sometimes they pay for it with their souls, or they're basically indentured servants, slaves to a criminal organization, or sometimes they're terribly mistreated on the way. And yes, there are in fact real human traffickers, and there are real kidnappings, but there's not 400,000 kids a year stolen from middle-class families in suburbs being stolen and sacrificed to Moloch. It's just not happening. And George Soros isn't paying 800,000 parents to be quiet about it.
You notice that there is a specific sector of the population, and I'm just going to call it out here and now. It also takes place here. Some listeners of the program are firmly aware that I'm from Leipzig, Germany, and that I also have residence in Toronto, Ontario, and, Canadian German. But in the conservative circles, in the extreme right-wing conservative circles here, there is a very disturbing trend of people who seem to think that everything is a Chris Hansen situation, or a Skeeter Jean situation, or a Dads vs. Pride situation, blah, 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 PCI, you name it. GDON, there are tons of these types of hardcore, and I'm talking you have Republicans, you have Canadian conservatives. These regular conservatives would think these people are fucking crazy when you take into consideration the idolatry that they have. Everyone's a sex trafficker. You need to watch out for people in white vans. It's sheerly and purely a fear-mongering tactic. Yes, it is happening. It happens everywhere, all around the world. But is it epidemic? Is it pandemic? Is it something that Turning Point USA, like organizations in Florida or in Georgia, is it something that they need to spend people's money on or government money on in order to completely extinguish? No, that's why you have special task forces that are associated with like the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, or, you know, the ATF in some cases. The FBI gets involved in a lot of like child trafficking cases and stuff like that. You don't need to have these kinds of people, as you mentioned, that are so drum up and so overly terrified that these things are happening to every child every day on every street corner in America. More on this at 11. It's not happening. And people need to have that fear inside in order for them to have some semblance of control. So when they feel that they control the rhetoric and the way the information goes, regardless of whether or not that's actually happening, that person or that particular entity or sector of ideology is winning. And you're right. There is definitely kind of a hysteria as it pertains to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it may not be reptilians, it might be vampires or demons or Jews or Democrats or bad Republicans. I don't know, whoever it is.
That considers to be the bad person of the week. You know, like at the end of the day, it's people like him and Alex Jones that make this world a more terrifying place, and not for good reasons either.
The Anunnaki of the moment. And anyway, it's like, you know, this is also something that bugs me. It's like, you know, the 18-year-old freshman in college who's dating the 16 and a half year old junior in high school, that's not a pedophile. I mean, it's like, that's like normal life. You know, the 28-year-old that's trying to date the 16 and a half year old, that's a pedophile. The 38-year-old, that sure as shit is. But, I mean...
Both of those are Chris Hansen moments.
Absolutely. I mean, but I would say it's just as creepy, maybe even well, I'm not going to say creepy. I don't want to gay measure the differences of creepy, but whatever it is that Leonardo DiCaprio is doing is super creepy. Al Pacino and Robert De Niro basically mirrored each other throughout life. Both, you know, being married with new kids to like 20-somethings is like super creepy. And, you know, and yes, all those women are over 18 and then this, that, and the other thing, but the age difference is still like 45 years. I mean, it's like
Leonardo DiCaprio, and you mentioned that whole thing, and we are in 100% agreement with you. That is very creepy. Al Pacino, Robert De Niro do display some very, very scary behaviors, but take into consideration for just 1 second, when we look at Hollywood as a whole and like film as a whole, do we not find it kind of bizarre how when you look at somebody like a Leonardo DiCaprio, he's almost universally acclaimed and critically praised and everything else, but what you just mentioned literally just seems to be the elephant in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge? Why is that?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so what's the distinction between Satanism and Luciferianism, and are there any figures that we should know about that are associated with Luciferianism?
So, in terms of the distinction, we could sit here and we could discuss for hours and go into minute combing the pages details about exactly what the distinction is. But succinctly, it's this. Satanism is essentially a free-thinking religion and or ideology. Do as you wish, do as you please, but do not bring harm to others. Do not be an inconvenience. Do not be a burden. Do not do anything that would violate the moral principles or ethical conduct of what one would consider to be a rational, normal human being. Luciferianism.
It's edgy dudism. And there really is a religion based on the Big Lebowski dudism, which is basically exactly that, except they're not giving anybody the finger. I mean, Satanism, they're like, fuck you, you're stupid for believing in God, but if you take that out of it and take out the word Satanism, it's basically dudism.
Correct. And the confusion between Satanism and Luciferianism comes when we're in 2025 now.
And I didn't know dudism was a religion, by the way, but we had one of the founders of it here on the show, and he taught me about it. And I actually think it's quite phenomenal. And he's like, we're one of the religions that we acknowledge that our religion is based on a fictional character, which the inference there that I drew, but I don't think he insinuated. I just think he's just acknowledging, put it out there. But I'm like, as you could sort of everyone else's is, but he absolutely did not say that. Those are my words, not his.
Well, I mean, you really have a career in stand-up comedy waiting for you whenever you choose to take that leap, man. But I digress and revert back.
Once the Social Security starts kicking in, I'll go on the road.
Oh my God, geez, dude! If you start to do RV travels with the Jeffinator, I swear you are going to have hundreds upon thousands of subscribers.
I don't think I'm a good enough driver to drive something as big as an RV. I think
so to drive, and you just tell the jokes and keep the camera on you. That's what big time people do, and that's what you need to do, man. You're a big guy, big star.
That's right. I don't know my place, and my place is on a pedestal. I got it.
It is. Look at you. No. We're going to take literally 30 seconds of this program just to very succinctly identify it. You are a very helpful, a very kind, a very knowledgeable, a very passionate, a resourceful, a resilient, a brilliant man who, in addition to his daily work, in addition to maintaining a fully functioning family, does whatever he can to help those close to him out. New podcast, new video, new series. Hey guys, why don't I give you a hand? That's Jeff. So...
I got lots of time for podcasts. I'm not sure about the rest of what he just said.
Give Jeff his flowers. Jeff is absolutely needing his flowers, and I want to see comments. I want to see good reviews. I will be watching. But digressing back to our previous point, when we look at the distinction of Satanism and Luciferianism, we succinctly touched on what Satanism is, and you nailed it right on the head. It's basically just kind of like edgy, yeah, man, I'm just going to do what I want, but don't worry, I'm not going to cut your grass the wrong way, sort of thing. But Luciferianism is literally the exact identity, or the exact identical opposite. When you look at it in terms of its mirror image, bam, it is right there in terms of the overall evil reminiscent of, okay, we need to take out those who don't believe in anything that we believe in. It's basically like white guy extremist Islam, for lack of a better term. And as you mentioned, Anton LaVey is a very, very popular figure. There were rumblings that David Duke of KKK affiliation, oh God, that thing is so uncomfortable to say, he has some association with not only the inception, but also the widespread of the information, as well as the indoctrination of people. It's not 100% confirmed, but to be completely direct with you, there are enough people saying it that if there's enough people saying it, there's probably some modicum of truth to it. But
the association, because the KKK, for all of the horrible things about the KKK, they think that they're super Christian, which of course they are not, but they think they are. And it's weird that they have a grand dragon, and isn't the dragon supposed to be Satan, in the world? So there is a logical thing that that seems like it could be a con. Now, I do not agree that I think that they misunderstand every single thing about Christianity that is out there. But again, they think they're super Christians. And they have a grand dragon. So
this church who thinks they're super Christian, they literally think with every funeral that they're outside and spreading their hateful rhetoric. They think God wants them to do that.
Right.
Jesus ain't never say that. Jesus doesn't want you to go around and hate on people that are different than you. No, that is not absolutely what Jesus wants you to do. Jesus wants you to give them a slice of cheese and be all like, hey, do you have a sandwich? No, here, have a sandwich. No, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and then I'll also teach you how to grow bread, and then carve cold cuts, and then make good cheese, and then so you can make sandwiches for the rest of your life. And wasn't that his whole thing? Teach people how to fish, so they can eat forever, So
you have another point to them.
He was big in the vocational training as well.
I hear he was pretty good at carpentry.
I'm not even sure he was that good a carpenter. I think it's just what his stepdad was doing. But yeah, he was big on the vocational training to get, he was definitely a do-it-yourselfer once you got trained to do it yourself. So it wasn't he wasn't like throw the kid into the woods and hope he doesn't get eaten by wolves. Maybe I misunderstand. I don't know. That's not.
Well, that's really an Olympic event called the toddler toss.
Right. Well, only the undesirable toddlers, of course. So, all right. So, where does Aleister Crowley fit into all of this?
Aleister Crowley's position in place. You and I are both firmly aware that there are a lot of people who confuse what his overall direct ideology or what he believed in specifically was.
I confuse this direct. I routinely think Aleister Crowley, but in my head put Timothy Leary, and they're completely different people.
Timothy Leary is another walnut to crack that I don't think any amount of knowledge or any historical scholar would be able to crack open that brain and be able to tell you, yep, this is what this guy's about.
Yeah, but this is like a psychologist who wants you to take psychedelics. I mean, but that is not at all Aleister Crowley. But in my head, I constantly put them together.
See, Aleister Crowley has been constantly maligned and just completely destroyed by media and or historical subject matter people, historians, different professionals that didn't agree with his approach to individualism in religion. As you are probably well aware, back in the 1718 and early 1900s, there was a lot of back and forth between the very specific niche sects of Judeo-Christian and or Catholicism-related religions, like your Presbyterianisms, your Lutheranisms, your, for lack of a better term, your Anglicans. There was a lot of back and forth between that. But a lot of people malign Aleister Crowley as being like a direct Luciferian, this evil entity, this person in whom wanted nothing more than to watch the world burn. But in actuality, a lot of what the information that scholars refuse to admit, regardless of whether or not they're in the United States or whether or not they're in the UK or whether or not they're in Germany or anywhere in between, is that Aleister Crowley was also a very philanthropic person. Within the community that he resided when he was a lot younger, he saw a lot of torment, a lot of tragedy, a lot of suffrage, a lot of pain that no kid should really have to see. So naturally, when you see a bunch of things like that, when you go through hardships, when you, for lack of a better term, live in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s barrios and ghettos of the world, like as somebody who has lived in ghettos and barrios throughout different courses of his lives, it changes you. When you see people just suffering in front of you, it's going to alter the way that you think. Whereas if you grow up in a homeowners association, white picket fence, gated community, sort of like living your whole life, never having to worry about where you're going to get your food, where you're going to get your money, how you're going to go to college, if you're going to go to college, if you're going to go to school, if you're going to die that day. Those types of things are going to lead to a completely different human experience. Aleister Crowley had probably one of the most unique kind of dynamic looks at his childhood and his early years, in the sense that he realized that he didn't really do a lot more than try to observe and understand the people around him. As he grew older and as he gained influence and as he became a little bit more well-known, people took his aggression, his assertiveness, his affiliation, and his desire to make the world a better place by any means necessary to an extreme degree. At no point did he want to kill people. He definitely didn't want to harm anybody. But the rhetoric became so spinned in a way that now, whenever you hear the words Aleister Crowley, you're like, oh, what a horrible person. But no, it wasn't always that way. The guy just got sick of people, and in the end, the words and everything written about him, whether it be from a historical study or whether it be from somebody who was just a fan of his work, there's a lot of differentiation between the two. There isn't a lot of similarity or a lot of cohesion. And the general understanding, again, is that he was an evil person. He's this terrible, awful person. When in actuality, no, he's just a dude that suffered a lot, made some bad mistakes, ultimately didn't really make the right ones by the end, but tried his best.
So he's definitely not Bane. If anything, he's closer to Dr. Doom, who a villain to most, but to his people in Latveria, an absolute hero and patriot. But what is he on the satanic Luciferian spectrum, or is he just the anarchist?
No. Okay, and again, taking this into account, this is clearly the opinions and views of this knowledge researcher. But no, he definitely doesn't fall on that spectrum as far as the observations of him as a human being, his actions, and his words. No, he definitely doesn't fall.
So he didn't even really associate with any of those things. So he doesn't even really belong in this conversation other than my confusion.
No, he belongs. He absolutely does. And the association and the affiliation of Aleister Crowley with Satanism and Luciferianism isn't necessarily that your view or your confusion on it is incorrect. He is still very much so a very popular and tantamount figure to both aspects of the attachment of both, but not for the reasons that everybody thinks. People believe that Aleister Crowley was one or the other, when in actuality he, as you referred to earlier with Dudism, was just a little bit more extreme in that respect.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of a metaphor, and there probably is one, but, Malcolm X maybe seems, because of the any means necessary. But
yeah, who was that gentleman? Not RFK. But there was a gentleman in the 1960s, and his name just keeps rolling off the top of my head. But now I can't. He was like Robert something. You know what? I'm not going to ruin the airwaves or give dead air with this. But there was another guy who was very, 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 very strongly wording his discontent with how his fellow white people in government, in law, in policing, we're treating black people, Chinese immigrants, Japanese immigrants, Slavic immigrants. And in the 60s, they're all like, oh, hey, yeah, you can't be saying that, and they shot him. So it was a few years before MLK, I think. But the association of whether it is good or bad in that construct has been so completely blown apart by misinformation that, it's very difficult to discern what is real and what is not. And even I am going to leave it open to the potential that I am 100% completely wrong and that there is a miracle book that's going to tell everything. We do what we can. We try to be as accurate as we can.
Okay. Now, I know that you wanted to talk about Janus, or as I pronounce it, Janus, which I have to be honest, I know Janus has the two faces. For whatever reason, I seem to think that Janus was somehow another word for Jupiter or Jove. Clearly, you're nodding. Janus I always associate with January, so I put it as something very old as well.
All of those are right.
All those are right. Okay, well, that's good to know. So, and I guess I shouldn't be so surprised because Saturn, who is associated with Satan, and so I guess Saturn was also Kronos, the Titan, so the father of Zeus, so, I guess, why not go Satan if you're going to otherwise, the first rule of conquest is hearts and minds, and then once you conquest with the military, you sort of bring your religion in, and you say the other religion are the demons and the children eaters and whatnot, and then maybe you slowly assimilate. But hey, our God is sort of close enough to you. We have a storm god too, and we have a woman who represents the cycle of life, and then we have we have three Furies that are close enough to your maiden, mother, and crone, and we have a god of water. Hey, we have a freshwater god too, and a salt water. Yeah, you can use that, right? Sure, okay. Okay, so tell me how Janus fits into this. I have a feeling I stumbled upon it. If I thought about it enough, I could probably put it together myself, but I don't want to put it together myself. I have you.
Well, we are here at your door, dearly beloved, dearly loved Evil Dose, Mr. Lippman. And yes, you are correct. The notion, the origins, the ideology, the visage of Janus, if you will. You're also well aware, after having some interaction with him on our podcast page, he's actually also the name of a close friend of mine who is directing our fine new program. But the name Janus, succinctly, as you very, very so succinctly and eloquently mentioned at the same time, is two faces, basically two sides.
Right. Similar
to Baphomet in the sense that it is both light, both dark, both good, both evil, but there is no direct association or affiliation. And as it pertains to Baphomet's evil, versus the personification of Janus as evil, over the course of time, since Janus has been mentioned before the time of the Eschaterians, one would argue even going back as far as 7, 8, 9, 10,000 years ago, Janus was being mentioned in texts, tablets, tomes, and stories as being very, very similar to what that of an undestroyed or an untainted Baphomet would be. Perfect ideology of balance, transitions, beginnings, the God that essentially provides every organism that has ever existed throughout the entire universe gateway access. It opens and closes doors for souls. Let's just say the gender of Janus, there is no gender of Janus. Janus can be a male, Janus can be a female, depending on whom is referring to Janus. It can be an it. It is essentially a very, very, very old way of saying, like, hey, he's completely asexual and transgender. Don't worry about it. It's all fine. He's anything and everything. He's pansexual. She is into lamps a lot. The whole point of Janus is that it is meant to represent all forms of everything. The God of beginnings, when not necessarily the book of Genesis and getting into the creation of the universe itself and either the fourth or the fifth day, but specifically with Janus is the beginning of absolutely everything, the beginning of thought, the beginning of opening the door to creating consciousness, the beginning of opening the door to enlightenment and understanding, not of a particular, oh, you need to worship me kind of way, or in a, hey, you need to give me $50 from your paycheck every Sunday or else you're not going to go to heaven sort of way, but in a way that was meant to be objective, was meant to guide humans in a very, oh, hey, there's this whole thing, you make your own choice, you live with it, just try not to hurt anybody, sort of ideology that Janus was based on. And one of the reasons why, when you look back at some of the Eschaterians and some of their texts versus how some of the early ancient Roman texts viewed Janus.
Who are the Eschaterians? Are they the Etruscans?
Sorry, the Etruscans. I am so sorry. Yes, you are correct. The Etruscans, not the Eschaterians. I'm thinking about fish right now. And I'm
right, the Eschaterians and I don't know. Eschatarian sounds like it would be a religious group.
No, you're totally right. I've been botching it. It is the Etruscans, and I am terribly sorry for that.
It's fine. I'm actually very interested in the Etruscans because everyone mentions them. I'm just like, don't they make Chianti?
Well, the Etruscans are, you have some knowledge, and actually I would argue a lot more knowledge than virtually any religious and or like historical scholar.
This is about as much as I know about the Etruscans. For a while they were Rome's rival, the Romans beat them, and they had basically their own language and a different set of gods and deities, but I mean, I don't know if it's so much different than, like, say, the Minoans or the Phoenicians or anyone else did from the Romans. They all seem to be semi-similar, but sort of how the Slavics are different than the Germanics, and but you could sort of like Spanish is to French more than Spanish is to Portuguese. No,
you kind of hit it on the head there. As far as it goes in terms of like the differentiation versus like how like the definition is, like you kind of hit it on the head. As far back as we go when we talk about the Etruscans, and yes, not the Eschaterians. I'm going to have some fish later on. Get some. I'm craving some tuna so bad, it's so good. But like the Etruscans were the arch rivals at some point throughout the Roman conquest. So when the Romans took over, for lack of a better term, the ideologies and the scriptures and the books and like the stories of the Etruscans and virtually everyone else they conquered, like how they have their own version of Zeus, they have their own version of Dionysus, they have their own version of Hermes, so on and so on. They took Janus and made it more of like a Russell Crowe and Gladiator kind of character, in the sense that conquest was of the utmost importance, but it is the God of beginnings that decides when that takes place. I will open the door for you if I want to open the door for you, and for all else the door and the portal and the afterlife shall remain closed. Whereas Janus, in the objective beginnings and writings and scriptures, it was, for lack of a better term, equal opportunity. you will have the door opened for you if you maintained a good enough character throughout your life. Or that door will be closed and the door will be opened into the proverbial abyss and you will spend eternity there if you did not have a good moral standing. Basically, Giannis's overall arc is that God of Doors, it's a metaphor. He's not making wood panel or steel doors for bank vaults. Doesn't care about that. It's a metaphor. Doors being a metaphor for transition, stages, moving forward, moving on. Getting into the differentiation between that and what people tried to make Baphomet. Baphomet was a lot easier to make into an evil symbol, not only because of the physical look, but in no text and no scripture can anyone agree what Giannis looks like. So that also helps in being able to put forth the message in a more positive way, despite how the Romans tried to destroy it after destroying the Etruscans.
Right. Well, the old, you can't see or describe the face of God. It's too glorious. If you see it, you would melt like candle wax. Not because it's violent, but because it's so glorious that it would burn you or freeze you instantly, or whatever the case might be. Which sounds terrifying. I guess that's a good way to keep you from looking at someone, I suppose. I'm now with my own thoughts again. I'm wondering if that's maybe where Frank L. Baum was trying to tell us about Oz, but I guess that's a different conversation indeed. But these things strike me when they strike me. I can't help it. So that's very interesting. I didn't know that there was that much to Janus, and I was always sort of wondering a little bit about it. And of course I've associate Janus, him, her, it, whatever, with theater, based on the comedy and tragedy masks more than probably anything else. And that doesn't seem to be exactly right either.
Are you a Pierce Brosnan fan? Do you enjoy Pierce Brosnan movies?
I mean, I like Pierce Brosnan. Handsome man, did some good work. Thomas Crown Affair, very good. Not a bad Bond. He's had some interesting roles later in life where I think he's played them pretty well. He tried his best in Black Adam to be a semi-interesting Dr. Fate in a movie that was largely not very interesting. So, I would say, I didn't really dig him as the Chiron, the educator centaur in Percy Jackson. That seems a little bit weird. He recently was a bad guy in some sort of spy show I saw, a movie. I don't know. He was good in that.
Probably thinking of?
No, it's with Tom Hardy is like his muscle. Mobland.
Mobland. Yeah, that's I think that's on Paramount Plus right now.
Yeah,
but
he was good.
In 1988, 1999 approximately, Pierce Brosnan was probably one of the most prolific actors when it comes to action, spy thrillers, all that good stuff. 1988, Taffin. Highly recommend anyone listening to watch that movie. It is incredible. It's basically Irish Rebellion. The whole movie. In an interview that he provided, I believe it was in 1992 or 1993, a couple years before GoldenEye. But it was alluded to that his idea behind the character was that of one that balances evil and good, one that makes sure that those who are held to task are held accountable for their actions of negativity and so on and so forth. Moving forward into 1995, when GoldenEye, the movie, came out, Sean Bean, probably one of the greatest British actors to have ever laced up a pair of acting shoes, his character was Alec Trevelyan, 006. After the explosion at the facility, after they depart from the dam, he essentially undergoes this radical transformation because Pierce Brosnan's character Bond almost kills him. He thinks that he does it on purpose or intentionally when he just messed up the timer. He didn't try to kill him.
All right, Taffin is free on Tubi and Pluto TV.
It is a great program. It is an outstanding watch. I highly recommend you have a shot of scotch or a shot of whiskey before watching it. It will make it 100% better. Not that it's bad. It will just make everything a little bit more relatable. But Alec Trevelyan's character in the GoldenEye, after the explosion, his name was Giannis. The reason that they gave him the code name Giannis wasn't because of the whole god of transitions, the god of beginnings, the opening of doors. It was because of the Russian basic bastardization of the Janus ideology in the sense that God of control. I am the leader of all and any who comes before and after me. So when Alex Rebellion survived the explosion, it twisted his character's mind in a way that he felt that he was God.
I could see that. I mean, that makes sense. If you are a human, you can easily get delusions of grandeur. I mean, people with far lesser talents than that seem to have captured that disease easily enough throughout history.
Dave Meltzer reference. Good one, Jeff.
I don't think I did a Dave Meltzer reference.
No, I did. I think he's a silly old man.
He is a silly old man, but he wasn't always. There's a Dave Meltzer who I encounter quite a bit in I think he's like an archaeologist or something, or like an anthropologist, maybe both. I mean, they're related disciplines. I think one is considered a subset of the other. I know one is considered a subset of the other, though I'm not sure I exactly buy into that, but it doesn't matter one by the anyway. So I hear about Dave Meltzer a lot there, especially when it comes to the Americas, especially North America. And then, of course, I hear about Dave Meltzer daily in wrestling world, but I mean, it really is my fault to be, 1,000 years old and still watching wrestling. So,
you stop. You are young and chipper, and you have another 50 to 60 years ahead of you at least.
Well, God forbid. Anyway, all right. So I think we did a lot. I know that you furnished me with an outro, which you cut down from. I think I gave you like a 3 or 4 minute limit, and I think you cut it down to 34 seconds. But I believe it's it's your own work. It's a cover that you have transformed into your own work. So that's cool. So I think you just launched your podcast, which you were putting on hold for a long, long time. And I have never seen somebody put out more podcasts in a shorter amount of time. I guess I was expecting you to do like a once a week and you're like, I think you're like up to episode like 14 already. It's like, and like you just started like a week and a half ago. So it's like, you're like a podcast and a half a day, which is pretty daunting. And it's surprisingly exhausting. I mean, it's the easiest thing to do, but it can also be hard and exhausting. Like I'm doing a second podcast later with Marie Shadows, thank you Marie, where we review MLW. And I'm really need a little map between this podcast and that. So anyway, tell people about where they can find and follow you and your stuff. Plug your stuff. I know it's the Cheating Death podcast.
Yes, sir. Well, that may be, holding back tears here a little bit, that might be one of the kindest and nicest things that anyone's ever, introduced that, in that way, yeah.
Get used to it. When you're a guest on podcast, part of the host's job is to let you plug your stuff.
No, I know, and not necessarily the plugging aspect. It's just, that whole taking compliments thing. Sometimes I get the weird shifty eye. I'm just like, I don't have any money, sir. It's okay. But no, I totally get you.
You're right. I don't think that you're trying to get a bus ticket to see your brother. Sorry.
My dude, I can't even get on a bus right now, so don't you worry. Anyway, referring back to your throw to me here, yes, the Cheating Death podcast is indeed a program that has been put on hold for lack of better term for the past 8 years. A lot of these ideas and a lot of the ways that things are being pitched in the program, as well as with who is directly involved at the producer level, both Albrecht and Heinrich, they've been basically pushing me to do this for a very long time. Close friends, family have been telling me, look, dude, you want to do it, just start doing it. And what stopped me is the concern of taking time away from other people, taking funds away from other people, or, just bothering other people. Didn't really want to be an inconvenience. I didn't want to, listen to this guy and his weird voice and his kind of Canadian accent. Yes, I went to the American English School of I'll use my credit card in order to not be made fun of for a heavy German/French Canadian accent.
Exactly. But why should you be any different than the 4.2 million other podcasts that are out there? And that is actually the amount of podcasts that exist.
that is a lot of podcasts. But yes, to kind of expound upon that, I thought to myself, what's the point of, putting a podcast out there when my thoughts are probably already being echoed or put out by other people? But whatever, we are where we are now, and we are actually up to the formal introduction and beginning, and I guess you want to use the term, the hosting and the official release of the podcast took place on the 6th of October of this year, after being in formal process and waiting for a good few weeks. We are hosted through the Spreaker platform. We have a monthly supporters club where for under $5 American a month, you can subscribe for extra content. We're available on all podcasting platforms. We will be releasing an episode probably every few days or so for the next little while. We are in an experimental stage. We're still trying to figure out exactly what type of podcast we are. The foundations are comedy, giving you some knowledge, going through some interesting and fun topics into our content, providing you with thorough researched information as it pertains to historical references, if that episode does pertain to a video game, a movie, actor, a genre, or any kind of information relating to that. If you have questions, concerns, or you want to hear anything on the episodes, you can email us at thecheatingdeathpodcast@gmail.com. You can reach out to us at twitter.com/weallcheatdeath or youtube.com/weallcheatdeath. And of course, for everything host related, you can check out twitter.com/Cleric of Chaos. And that is the 0 in the of. I've had emails from people asking, hey man, your links don't work. No. Click the link in the podcast or click the link on my YouTube or on the Twitter. The of is with a 0. And at linktr.ee/Cleric of Chaos, you can also get all merch, Cameo, any sort of music that you would want, 105 different pieces of shirts, cups, and different pieces of merchandise. And of course, if you're looking to obtain information regarding consulting, your artistic projects, your potential business endeavors, you want to get better at time management, you want to learn how to communicate, by all means, you can set up a meeting with me in the payment system on linktr.ee/Cleric of Chaos. Just book a meeting and you'll be good to go. That said, we also have a bunch of friends of the program, including Mr. Lippman, Mr. Evil Dose himself. We strongly encourage anybody visiting our twitter.com/weallcheatdeath program page to visit that post at the top. And please like, share, and subscribe every single person on that list.
There you go. Wow. Excellent pitch. All right, folks. So you hear it. There's a lot there. You've gotten a taste of the Cleric today. The Cleric was a guest on a prior show, cleverly titled Cleric of Chaos. So I'm not sure what I'm going to entitle this one, but it won't be as clever as the Cleric of Chaos, but it might be the Cleric of Arcana. So, because, I don't like to think too hard because I do a lot and it gives me a headache. I've lost all my hair. You can't see me, but Cleric can. And he's seen me before, and I was going on the Steve Bannon phase of hair only hair.
Love that hair, man. Loved it.
Yeah, well, maybe one day, who knows? But this is a lot easier. This is an homage to my late great friend Tom Ashwell. It's actually not, but it actually is a lot like what his hairstyle was. But we'll see. I'm on YouTube every now and then, so if you're really curious, you got to find me on one of those things where my mug is on the TV. Anyway, if you're here because you follow the Cleric or you got here by accident, welcome. This is the Garden of Thought. You can subscribe to it on any of your major podcast functions. Spreaker is also our home base, though we have not agreed to the supporters thing. Maybe I should, but I haven't, and I probably won't. I'd love to say it's because I don't want money from you. I do. What I don't want is to not get any money from anyone and feel the gripping ice cold, face of that failure for not getting even $9 from 3 people. So I remain completely free. And, anyway, Garden Thought, you'll generally get at least 2, probably 3 shows a week. One will be a little bit like this. One will be, actually a lot of them are more like this these days, but every now and then you're going to get something that's very business, legal, or realpolitik oriented. And probably once every 2 weeks, maybe 3 times a month, sometimes a little bit less. You'll get a show with me talking to a wrestler. Oftentimes my co-host will also be a wrestler, and we'll be talking to a wrestler, someone in wrestling. And if we can at all, we're going to get them to talk about non-wrestling stuff to the extent possible. And every now and then I recruit a new friend who then becomes conscripted to be a guest on the podcast, as we just did with the reigning heavyweight champion of Major League Wrestling, Mads Cruel Atrocity Kruger, who has agreed to be a guest and talking about Alien Earth in the near future. So I'm excited about that. And he was a guest on the Gospel of Thomas. And I do a bunch of other things. I do the LFG show on Wrestling Soup. I do the Evolve show on the Wrestling Soup and Friendos. I do NXT PLE reviews with Drew Yari. I do MLW with Marie Shadows. Basically, I'm an attention whore. So if you ask me to be a guest, I'd like to do it. I'm not quite as versatile as the Cleric, but I'm almost as versatile as the Cleric. And I'm fatter. So there's that. All right, everyone. You can hear some of his original music. Talk to you later in the week.
Edition of Jeff Lippman Garden of Thought podcast right here on Sports Jedi Network Media Family in collaboration with Jeff Lippman of the Wrestling Soup and Friendos. Tonight we planted the seeds, broke down the psychology, dissected the booking philosophies, and gave you perspective beyond the surface level takes. This isn't just recap culture. This is wrestling discourse and beyond. This is nuance. This is the space where fandom meets analysis. Major respect to the entire Wrestling Soups and Friendos community for the platform, the energy, and the continued collaboration. And to everyone rocking with the Sports Jedi Network, your support keeps independent wrestling media and more alive and evolving. If you value thoughtful wrestling conversation, do us a favor, follow Jeff Lippman Garden of Thought, of the Wrestling Soups, and Sports Jedi Network on your favorite audio platforms. Hit that like button. Leave those 5-star reviews. They matter more than you think in the algorithm economy. And most importantly, submit your comments. Your takes, your counterpoints, your hot takes. That dialogue fuels the next episode. Independent voices thrive when the community participates. Until next time, stay critical, stay passionate, and keep your thoughts growing. We'll catch you on the next one.
You're watching Jedi Sports Network with Kev.